Appreciate you guys in the chat jumping in as well. We got Pierce jumping in with ACC. That is what we do here on the pod. A lot of ACC conversation. And, of course, aviation. Good to see you again. Miami can't shoot themselves in the foot. That is exactly right. And I think that's where it starts for Miami with Carson Beck, Mark Fletcher, Malachi Toney, CJ Daniels, a lot of these playmakers on this Miami team. They have to value the football. Malachi Toney's had a couple of, scary moments in this college football playoff with turnovers. That's got to be, at the top of Mario Cristobal's mind against a team like Indiana that feeds off of those turnovers. You saw what it did to Oregon. Now, who knows if that would have changed the impact of Indiana-Oregon, but opening play, you can't have something like that happen, obviously. But you really can't have turnovers pile up over the course of a game against this Indiana team where Fernando Mendoza has 8 touchdowns compared to just 5 incompletions on his college football playoff run. The Heisman Trophy winner has been getting it done, but Indiana's run game can certainly make possessions obviously matter even more if you involve the turnover situation for those Miami Hurricanes, which they've kind of, whether they've been somebody's fault or not, have been prone to do at times. So with that, you've got to take care of the football. Indiana, Roman Hemby in that run game, one of the best in the Big Ten and of course in the country. They're 12th nationally. They are going to wear you down with their physical style of play. And so when you turn the ball over, that doesn't turn into a just wasted possession. It turns into something that could take another 3, 4, 5 minutes off the clock. And that gives you 1 less possession, 2 less possessions, however you want to look at it. And possessions are going to be at a premium in this national championship game. With these two teams playing the style they do, possessions are going to be at a premium. They're going to be very valuable in this national championship game. This national championship game has a feel of some of those national championship or SEC championship or, kind of those heavyweight games we saw in like 08, 9, 10, 11, especially that 11 season, Alabama, LSU, those type of games where I don't think this game is going to be 6-3 or 9-6 or any of those type of games that we saw during that course of college football where defense was at that level because college football is just too explosive now. But you are going to see, I think, a game that moves relatively quickly because of the drives and the style of these teams. I think both offenses are actually going to have a decent amount of success. I think we're going to see both teams be able to run the ball a little bit here. I think that's a credit to what Indiana's put together as far as Roman Hemby and that run game and Pat Coogan leading the way up front there. And of course, I'm going to give credit to Miami and Shannon Dawson. I think will have no issue sticking with the run game in Coral Gables tonight not Coral Gables, in Miami Gardens tonight, because you're going to have Mark Fletcher. This Miami offensive line was such a dramatic difference between the two groups. I mean, you're going to see that up front, and it's going to be talked about not only on this show, but it's going to be talked about throughout the day. And I do love the national championship is game day is kind of like, watching kind of the lead up to the Masters. You consume all of the coverage on a golf network, or ESPN is live from there, or wherever. Game day of the national championship is exactly like the Super Bowl in that regard. I've got the TV on all day in the house, and so you're going to see 85 million ESPN personalities and different personalities on there talking about every single angle of the game. And we try to have you covered here in an hour. That's what we try to do here at All Access AM. But one of the big points that I look at is that Miami offensive line, the size advantage. Just you think just kind of baseline for that group outside of James Brockermeyer from right here in Dallas, where I'm based out of. That 6'6", 320 type of range, and then you get up to the Markel Bells that 6'8" or 6'9", whatever he is, 345. It's just a dramatic size difference for this Miami team that they bring into this game up front. So I don't think Shannon Dawson's going to have a problem leaning on it and that run game, and whoever can establish the more physically violent offensive production early on, I think is going to set themselves up really well in this game, assuming that turnovers don't come into play, assuming that a game-changing play, on special teams with a punt return or kick return, a huge explosive offensively from one of these two teams doesn't come to the picture. That run game is going to set you up for success late in this game. And that is where Miami has to win in that regard. And almost if you're looking at this from Miami's perspective, you can have that turnover later in the game. You could have it in the third quarter. And I think we're in for a close one. So don't get me wrong. It's going to be important that they don't. But if you've established the run, if you've established what you want to do as far as leaning on this Indiana defense, that is going to be really important. Miami is going to be without Elijah Lofton. He was ruled out on the injury report on Sunday. No surprise there. Xavier Lucas, the defensive back who got called for, I don't know what it's called, targeting anymore in the game against Ole Miss. He'll be out the first half. That's got to get fixed. That rule just has to get fixed. Games are too important, too much money on the line. All of these things, they've got to fix that targeting rule. And in particular in the playoffs, they have to. Of course, Miami did list Damari Brown, defensive back, questionable as well. So, but my point is Miami is going to have to establish a run without Elijah Lofton out there, which we kind of knew going in as we got into this. But, Indiana's defense, entered the college football playoff number 2 nationally in scoring, 10.8 points per game given up, 4th overall, 257 yards per game given up. And, this is where you're going to have to show all of this recruiting on the offensive line, all of these additions and the depth that you have on the offensive line. This is where you're going to see the difference made is up front for Miami. And so I'm really intrigued to see how does Miami make this happen up front and establishes that type of dominance up front that you would hope, if you're a Miami fan, you see early and often, and that makes you feel a little bit better as you're looking to be the first team to win a national championship in your home stadium in the college football playoff era. And you're going to have a lot of this outside noise for a lot of these players, being from Miami, a lot of them, having obviously all the family and outside noise, kind of around this game all week long. I wonder if that impacts Miami at all. Do we see them come out, pressing too much or maybe even a little tight? I don't think they'll be tight. I think this will be a moment where they, run through the smoke, so to speak, and can see clearly and get right to work against Indiana. But you never know. And both of these teams are really good at winning the turnover battle for the most part. And Miami is going to have to make some things happen on the ground. They aren't the best teams tackling. They do tackle well as gain tackling, but both of these teams do have just kind of straight up issues tackling one-on-one. They're both among the nation's 20 worst teams in tackling, according to PFF. But Miami does, when they get into the red zone defensively, facing opposing offenses, they have a tendency to give up touchdowns in part because of that. They are one of the better red zone scoring teams in the for their offense, but they just struggle at times, to get guys down and force field goals. So that's something that Indiana, obviously in the red zone, their field goal kicker is very good. Beyond that, it's kind of, a question mark. They don't really lean on them. We talked about that last week on the pod, but you have to get these players on the ground if you're Miami. And to do that, you've got to play with intense effort. We will get my prediction here in just a moment. A couple other notes that, we want to look at here as, Miami and Indiana get to face off. Miami's offense is going to face an Indiana defense that is very difficult to game plan for because they're so multiple. Mario Cristobal talking with the media this weekend, saying they're multiple on the back end, multiple up front. And so they really have, because of that multiplicity that they display, they have an ability to challenge your offensive line, to challenge Carson Beck, to get you lined up, but also ID all of the right fronts, make sure you're having the right person in your blocking schemes, whether that be pass pro, whether that be run blocking. That is something that we're going to keep an eye on really, really closely.